Millionaire Richard Whittaker sat in first-class seat 2A of the transatlantic flight, his face red with exhaustion and embarrassment as his 6-month-old baby Emma screamed at the top of her lungs. For 3 straight hours, every passenger on the plane had been subjected to the relentless crying that no amount of money, influence, or desperation seemed able to stop. Richard had tried everything. He'd walked the aisles bouncing Emma, offered her bottles, changed her diaper multiple times, and even played classical music on his noise-canceling headphones pressed against her tiny ears. Nothing worked. The other first-class passengers were shooting him increasingly hostile looks. Flight attendants had offered suggestions that failed miserably. Even the pilot had made a subtle announcement about ensuring all passengers have a comfortable journey, which Richard knew was directed at him. That's when something unthinkable happened. A 16-year-old black boy from the economy section walked up to Richard's seat, his clothes worn but clean, his backpack patched with duct tape. Without asking permission or introducing himself, the teenager gently reached toward the screaming baby. "May I?" he asked quietly, his young voice somehow cutting through Emma's wails. Richard was so exhausted and desperate that he didn't even question why a stranger, let alone a teenager, was offering to help. He simply nodded, too tired to care about protocol or propriety. The moment the boy's hands touched Emma, something miraculous happened. The screaming stopped. Complete, absolute silence fell over the entire airplane cabin as 200 passengers held their breath, waiting to see if this impossible quiet would last. The teenager was holding Emma with a confidence that seemed impossible for someone his age, gently applying pressure to specific points on her back while humming a soft melody that Richard had never heard before. Emma's eyes, which had been squeezed shut in distress for hours, slowly opened and focused on the boy's face. For the first time since takeoff, she looked calm, peaceful, almost happy. "How did you?" Richard whispered, staring at this mysterious teenager who had accomplished what trained nannies and pediatric specialists couldn't achieve. The boy smiled gently. "My baby sister had colic. Took me months to figure out what actually worked." Richard looked around the cabin and saw something that made his heart race with disbelief. Every single passenger was staring at them, not with annoyance anymore, but with amazement and gratitude. But what shocked Richard most was what he noticed about this young man who had just performed a miracle with his daughter. The boy's backpack was covered with mathematics competition patches, his notebook was filled with complex equations, and there was an intelligence in his eyes that seemed far beyond his years. "Who are you?" Richard asked, his voice filled with wonder and curiosity. The teenager looked Richard directly in the eyes with a maturity that was startling. "My name is Noah Simon. I'm 16 years old, I'm from Southside Chicago, and I'm on my way to London to compete in the International Mathematics Competition Championship." Richard felt his world shift as he realized that the person who had just saved his sanity and his daughter's comfort wasn't some trained professional or wealthy peer. He was a brilliant teenager from one of the most challenging neighborhoods in America. But as Noah continued to hold Emma, who was now gurgling contentedly, Richard had no idea that this chance encounter was about to reveal a story of determination, sacrifice, and genius that would change both their lives forever. And neither of them knew that what happened next would challenge everything Richard thought he knew about worth, intelligence, and what it truly means to help someone in need. Richard was the 42-year-old CEO of Whittaker Technologies, a company worth over $8 billion that specialized in artificial intelligence and machine learning. He was traveling to London for a series of board meetings that could determine the future of his company's expansion into European markets. Normally, Richard traveled alone, focusing on work during flights and conducting business calls from 35,000 feet. But this trip was different because his wife, Sarah, was recovering from emergency surgery and couldn't care for their 6-month-old daughter, Emma. "I can reschedule the London meetings," Richard had told Sarah as she lay in the hospital bed. "Absolutely not," Sarah replied firmly. "This deal is too important for the company. Take Emma with you. How hard can it be to manage a baby for a 5-day business trip?" Richard had hired the best nanny agency in the city to find someone who could travel with them, but the nanny had called in sick at the last minute with food poisoning. With no time to find a replacement, Richard found himself boarding a plane to London with a 6-month-old baby, no childcare experience, and a packed schedule of crucial business meetings. For the first hour of the flight, Emma had been perfect. She slept peacefully in her first-class bassinet while Richard reviewed contracts and financial projections. He began to think that his wife had been right. How hard could it be? Then Emma woke up screaming, and Richard's confidence evaporated completely. He tried feeding her the bottle that Sarah had prepared, but Emma rejected it violently, pushing it away with her tiny hands and crying even harder. He tried changing her diaper in the airplane bathroom, a claustrophobic experience that left him sweating and flustered, but Emma continued screaming. He tried walking the aisles, bouncing her gently as he'd seen Sarah do, but Emma's cries only got louder and more desperate. The flight attendants offered suggestions with professional smiles that couldn't hide their growing concern about the disruption to other passengers. "Sometimes babies just need to cry it out," one attendant suggested diplomatically. "Have you tried playing some white noise?" another offered, bringing Richard a small speaker with ocean sounds. Nothing worked. Emma screamed with an intensity that seemed impossible for such a small human being. As the hours passed, Richard became increasingly aware of the hostile atmosphere developing around him in the first-class cabin. In seat 1A, elderly businessman Harold Morrison was making increasingly loud sighs and checking his watch dramatically every few minutes. "This is exactly why children shouldn't be allowed in first class," Morrison muttered to his wife, loud enough for Richard to hear. In seat 3B, prominent socialite Victoria Sterling was typing aggressively on her phone, probably complaining to friends about the inconsiderate parents who were ruining her flight. "Some people have no consideration for others," she said to her assistant. "If you can't control your child, you shouldn't bring them on a plane." Richard felt his face burning with embarrassment and anger. These were people from his own social circle, wealthy, influential individuals who should understand that sometimes circumstances beyond your control create difficult situations. But their judgment felt particularly harsh because Richard was struggling with something he had always assumed came naturally to parents. He was a brilliant businessman who could manage billion-dollar deals and lead teams of hundreds of employees. Yet he couldn't figure out how to comfort his own 6-month-old daughter. The most painful part was watching Emma's distress and feeling completely helpless to fix it. Every wail seemed to be expressing not just physical discomfort, but a deeper need that Richard didn't understand how to meet. As the flight progressed, Richard began to panic about more than just the immediate situation. He had 5 days of crucial business meetings in London, and he couldn't bring a screaming baby into boardrooms filled with potential investors and partners. His entire European expansion deal could collapse if he couldn't figure out how to care for Emma properly. What Richard didn't know was that 3 rows behind him in economy class, 16-year-old Noah Simon had been listening to Emma's cries with growing concern and recognition. Noah was traveling to London alone, carrying a backpack containing his few possessions and a plane ticket purchased with money his community had raised through bake sales, car washes, and small donations. The International Mathematics Competition Championship was his one chance to earn a full scholarship to MIT, an opportunity that could change not just his life but his entire family's future. Noah came from Southside Chicago, where he lived with his mother, grandmother, and 3 younger siblings in a 2-bedroom apartment. His mother, Lisa, worked double shifts as a nurse's aide to support the family, while his grandmother, Rosa, cared for the children during the day. 2 years earlier, Noah's youngest sister, Maya, had been born with severe colic that kept her crying for hours every day and night. The family couldn't afford to take Maya to specialists or purchase expensive treatments, so Noah had spent months researching colic remedies, learning about infant massage techniques, and experimenting with different approaches to soothe his sister. Through trial and error, patience and determination, Noah had eventually figured out a combination of gentle pressure points, specific holding positions, and calming techniques that could stop Maya's crying within minutes. "Noah's got magic hands," his grandmother would say with pride. "That boy can calm any baby." As Noah listened to Emma's screams echoing through the airplane cabin, he recognized the same type of distressed crying that Maya had exhibited. He could hear the specific pitch and rhythm that indicated the baby was experiencing digestive discomfort combined with overstimulation. Noah knew he could help, but he also knew that a black teenager from the inner city approaching a wealthy white businessman in first class was likely to be viewed with suspicion, hostility, or outright rejection. Noah had experienced enough discrimination and prejudice in his 16 years to understand that many people would see him as a threat rather than a helper, regardless of his intentions or abilities. For 2 hours, Noah wrestled with the decision. He pulled out his mathematics textbooks and tried to focus on preparing for the competition that represented his future, but Emma's increasingly desperate cries made concentration impossible. Finally, Noah's compassion overcame his fear of rejection. Noah closed his textbook and stood up, ignoring the curious stares of nearby passengers who wondered why a teenager was walking toward first class. The flight attendant at the divider between economy and first class looked at Noah with polite suspicion. "Can I help you with something?" she asked, clearly prepared to redirect him back to his seat. "The baby in first class," Noah said quietly. "I think I might be able to help." The flight attendant looked skeptical. "Are you traveling with family in first class?" "No, ma'am," Noah replied respectfully. "But I have experience with colicky babies, and I recognize the type of crying. Sometimes there are techniques that can help." The flight attendant glanced toward first class, where Emma's screams were reaching new levels of intensity, then back at Noah's earnest face. "Let me ask the father," she said diplomatically. But before she could move, Richard Whittaker appeared in the aisle, holding the screaming Emma and looking completely overwhelmed. "I heard someone say they might be able to help," Richard asked desperately, his usual executive composure completely shattered by hours of his daughter's distress. Noah took a deep breath, knowing that this moment would determine whether he would be accepted as a helper or dismissed as an inappropriate intruder. "Sir, my name is Noah Simon. I know I'm just a kid, but I have a baby sister who had really bad colic, and I learned some techniques that helped her. I think your daughter might be experiencing similar discomfort." Richard looked at Noah, really looked at him, for the first time. He saw intelligence in the young man's eyes, confidence in his posture, and most importantly, genuine concern for Emma's well-being. Richard was exhausted enough and desperate enough to consider help from any source. "What kind of techniques?" Richard asked, raising his voice to be heard over Emma's crying. "Gentle pressure on specific points along her spine, combined with a particular holding position that can relieve gas and digestive pressure," Noah explained professionally. "Also, sometimes babies get overstimulated by too much bouncing and movement. They need calm, steady pressure instead." Richard looked around the first-class cabin and realized that every passenger was watching this interaction with intense interest. Some looked skeptical about accepting help from a teenager, while others appeared hopeful that someone might finally bring peace to the flight. Richard made a decision that would change everything. "Please," he said, extending Emma toward Noah. "If you think you can help her, I'm willing to try anything." What happened next seemed to defy logic and medical understanding. The moment Noah's experienced hands made contact with Emma, her crying began to diminish. Noah held her in a specific position that Richard had never seen before, supporting her head and neck with one hand while applying gentle, rhythmic pressure along her spine with the other. "Babies with colic often have trapped gas and digestive discomfort," Noah explained quietly as he worked. "This position helps release the pressure while the back massage stimulates their digestive system." Emma's screaming reduced to whimpering, then to soft hiccups, then to complete silence. The entire first-class cabin watched in amazement as Noah began humming a soft, melodic tune that seemed to hypnotize the baby. Emma's eyes, which had been squeezed shut in distress, slowly opened and focused on Noah's face. "Where did you learn that song?" Richard asked, mesmerized by the transformation in his daughter. "My grandmother taught it to me," Noah replied, continuing the gentle back massage. "She said it was a lullaby her mother sang to her when she was a baby. Sometimes old songs carry a special kind of comfort." Richard watched as Emma began to relax completely in Noah's arms. Her tiny fists, which had been clenched in distress, slowly uncurled. Her breathing became deep and regular. For the first time in hours, she looked peaceful. The businessman in seat 1A, who had been complaining loudly about the disruption, now watched Noah with obvious admiration. "Remarkable," Harold Morrison said to his wife. "Absolutely remarkable." Victoria Sterling put down her phone and stared at Noah with a mixture of surprise and respect. "I've never seen anything like that," she whispered to her assistant. The flight attendants gathered nearby, amazed by the sudden transformation in the cabin's atmosphere. "How long will she stay calm?" Richard asked Noah hopefully. "If she's experiencing what I think she is, She should sleep peacefully for the rest of the flight, Noah replied confidently. The pressure on her digestive system has been relieved, and she's no longer overstimulated. True to Noah's prediction, Emma's eyes began to flutter closed as she settled into peaceful sleep. As Noah gently transferred the sleeping Emma back to Richard's arms, maintaining the same supportive position, Richard found himself studying this remarkable teenager with new eyes. "Noah, you said you're traveling to London for a mathematics competition?" Richard asked quietly, not wanting to wake Emma. "Yes, sir. The International Mathematics Competition Championship. It's a global competition for high school students, and the top finishers receive full scholarships to universities like MIT, Stanford, and Cambridge." Richard was impressed. "That's incredibly competitive. You must be exceptionally gifted in mathematics." Noah shrugged modestly. "I love solving problems, whether they're mathematical equations or figuring out how to help a crying baby. To me, they're both puzzles that need the right approach." "Tell me about your background," Richard said, settling into his seat with Emma sleeping peacefully in his arms. "How did a 16-year-old from Chicago become qualified for an international mathematics competition?" Noah's eyes lit up as he shared his story, though he remained standing in the aisle, unsure if he was welcome to sit in the empty first-class seat beside Richard. "I've always been good with numbers, but my school in Southside Chicago doesn't have a strong math program. Most of my learning has been self-directed, using library books and online resources." Richard gestured for Noah to sit down, genuinely interested in hearing more. "My math teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed my ability in 8th grade and started giving me extra problems to solve. When I finished the entire high school curriculum in 6 months, she helped me find online college courses." "How did you qualify for the London competition?" Richard asked. "I won the Chicago Regional Competition, then the Illinois State Championship, then the national qualifying rounds," Noah explained matter-of-factly. "Each level gets harder, but I've always been able to see patterns in mathematical problems that others miss." Richard was beginning to understand that he wasn't just talking to any teenager. He was speaking with a mathematical prodigy whose intellectual gifts were as remarkable as his ability to calm crying babies. "How is your trip to London being funded?" Richard asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Noah's expression became more serious. "My community raised money for my plane ticket and accommodations. The barber shop on my block, the church congregation, neighbors who could barely afford their own bills, they all contributed because they believe in my potential." Richard felt a profound shift in his understanding of the young man sitting beside him. Noah wasn't just naturally gifted. He was carrying the hopes and dreams of an entire community that had invested in his success despite their own financial struggles. "What happens if you win the competition?" Richard asked. "Full scholarship to MIT with additional funding for living expenses," Noah replied, his voice filled with quiet determination. "It would mean I could study mathematics and computer science at the highest level and eventually come back to my community to create educational programs for other kids like me." Richard realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Not just mathematical genius, but the kind of character and vision that could change the world if given the right opportunities. But he also recognized that Noah was carrying enormous pressure. One competition would determine whether he could pursue his dreams or return to Chicago with the knowledge that his community's investment in him hadn't paid off. As Emma continued sleeping peacefully, Richard found himself making a decision that surprised even him. "Noah, I have a proposition for you," Richard said, his executive mind already formulating a plan. Noah looked curious but cautious. "What kind of proposition, sir?" "I'm in London for 5 days of crucial business meetings, and as you can see, I'm completely unprepared to care for Emma while conducting international business negotiations." Richard paused, watching Noah's reaction carefully. "I'd like to hire you as Emma's caregiver during my London trip. I'll pay you $500 per day, provide you with a hotel room adjoining mine, and ensure you have transportation to and from your mathematics competition." Noah stared at Richard in shock. $500 per day? Sir, that's more money than my mother makes in a week. "It's what a professional nanny would cost in London," Richard replied. "And frankly, you've already proven you're more skilled with Emma than any professional I could hire." Noah's mind raced as he considered the implications of Richard's offer. The money would be life-changing for his family, but he was also concerned about maintaining his focus on the competition that represented his future. "Mr. Whitaker, I'm honored by your offer, but I need to be completely prepared for this mathematics competition. My entire future depends on my performance." Richard smiled, recognizing the maturity and priorities that Noah was demonstrating. I understand completely. The competition comes first. I would only need your help with Emma during my business meetings and in the evenings. You would have complete freedom to study and prepare during your free time. Richard leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. Noah, in the past 3 hours, you've shown me something that I haven't encountered often in my business career. Someone who can solve problems that others can't, who remains calm under pressure, and who acts with genuine compassion rather than self-interest. What do you mean? Noah asked. You could have stayed in your economy seat and ignored a crying baby that wasn't your responsibility. Instead, you risked rejection and embarrassment to help a stranger. That kind of character is rarer than mathematical genius. Noah felt overwhelmed by the unexpected turn his trip to London was taking. What had started as a scholarship competition was becoming something much larger and more complex. Can I have some time to think about it? Noah asked. Of course, Richard replied. But I should mention one more thing. What's that? Richard's expression became even more serious. My company, Whitaker Technologies, has a foundation that provides scholarships and mentorship to exceptionally gifted students from underserved communities. Regardless of how you perform in the mathematics competition, I'd like to discuss how we might support your educational goals. Noah felt his heart racing as he realized that this chance encounter on an airplane might be opening doors he had never imagined possible. But he also felt the weight of uncertainty. Was Richard's offer genuine help, or was there something more complicated beneath the surface? How would accepting charity from a billionaire affect his sense of self-reliance and pride? As the airplane began its descent toward London, Noah realized that the mathematics competition he had traveled so far to enter might not be the most important test he would face during his time in England. The real test would be navigating the complex world of wealth, privilege, and opportunity that Richard Whitaker represented, while staying true to the values and community that had shaped him into the remarkable young man he had become. But as Noah looked at baby Emma sleeping peacefully in her father's arms, he knew that this moment had already changed his life in ways he was only beginning to understand. As the plane touched down at London Heathrow Airport, Noah made a decision that would alter the course of his entire future. Mr. Whitaker, Noah said quietly as passengers began gathering their belongings, I accept your offer. I'll help care for Emma during your business meetings. Richard felt relief wash over him as he realized he wouldn't have to navigate crucial negotiations while managing a baby alone. But more than that, he was genuinely excited about the opportunity to learn more about this remarkable young man. Excellent, Richard replied, adjusting Emma in his arms as she continued sleeping peacefully. I have a car waiting to take us to the hotel. We can discuss the details of our arrangement during the drive. As they walked through the airport together, a billionaire CEO, a sleeping baby, and a teenager from Chicago's South Side, Noah couldn't help but notice the curious stares they attracted. He was used to being invisible in most settings, but walking alongside Richard Whitaker made him suddenly visible in ways that felt both exciting and overwhelming. The car waiting outside was unlike anything Noah had ever seen. The sleek black Mercedes had a driver in uniform and an interior that looked more like a luxury office than a vehicle. The International Mathematics Competition begins tomorrow with the opening ceremony, Noah said as they settled into the car. The actual competition takes place over 3 days, with different rounds testing various mathematical skills. Richard listened intently as Noah explained the competition format, impressed by the young man's thorough preparation and strategic thinking. What are your strongest areas? Richard asked. Number theory and combinatorial mathematics, Noah replied confidently. I also excel at problem solving under time pressure, which is crucial for this type of competition. As they drove through London's busy streets, Richard found himself studying Noah with growing respect. This wasn't just a mathematically gifted teenager. This was a young man with exceptional analytical skills, emotional intelligence, and the kind of determination that Richard recognized from his own rise in the business world. When they arrived at the 5-star Langham Hotel in central London, Noah felt like he had stepped into a different universe. The hotel lobby was more elegant than any building Noah had ever entered, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and furniture that probably cost more than his family's annual rent. Mr. Whitaker, welcome back, the hotel manager said warmly, approaching them with professional enthusiasm. Your usual suite is ready, and we've prepared the adjoining room as requested." As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Noah tried to process the reality of his situation. Less than 12 hours ago, he had been sitting in economy class, worried about affording meals during his London stay. Now he was staying in a luxury hotel suite as the guest of one of America's most successful businessmen. Richard's suite was larger than Noah's family's entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of London, a full kitchen, a dining area, and multiple bedrooms. "Your room is through that door," Richard said, gesturing toward an adjoining suite. "You'll have complete privacy, your own bathroom, and 24-hour room service." Noah opened the door to his room and felt overwhelmed by its elegance and size. The bed was larger than any he had ever seen. The bathroom had a marble bathtub and gold fixtures, and the window offered a stunning view of Hyde Park. "Mr. Whitaker, this is incredible, but I have to ask, why are you being so generous? You barely know me." Richard was preparing a bottle for Emma, who was beginning to stir from her long nap. "Noah, in my business career, I've learned to recognize exceptional people quickly. What you did on that airplane wasn't just about baby care. It demonstrated problem-solving skills, emotional intelligence, and the courage to act when others wouldn't." Richard paused, testing the temperature of Emma's bottle on his wrist. "But more than that, you remind me of myself at your age. I also came from a background where opportunities were scarce, and I had to work harder than others to prove my worth." Noah felt surprised by this revelation. "You didn't grow up wealthy?" Richard smiled as Emma accepted her bottle eagerly. "My father was a factory worker in Detroit, and my mother cleaned offices to make ends meet. I earned a scholarship to study business at the University of Michigan, and I built my company from nothing." This information changed Noah's entire perception of Richard. He had assumed that all billionaires were born into privilege, but here was proof that exceptional success could come from humble beginnings. "The difference," Richard continued, "is that I had mentors along the way who believed in my potential and opened doors that I couldn't have opened myself. I want to be that kind of mentor for you." The next morning, Noah woke up in the luxury hotel room feeling both excited and nervous about the competition that would determine his future. Richard had already arranged for breakfast to be delivered to both their rooms, along with a schedule showing his business meetings and Emma's care needs. "I have meetings from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. today," Richard explained as they shared breakfast. "Emma typically naps from 1 to 3, so you'll have 2 hours of complete freedom to focus on your competition." Noah appreciated Richard's understanding of his priorities, but he was also discovering that caring for Emma felt natural and enjoyable rather than burdensome. The opening ceremony for the International Mathematics Competition was held at the Royal Institution in London, a historic building where some of the world's greatest scientific discoveries had been announced. Noah walked into the auditorium and felt his heart racing as he saw hundreds of teenage mathematical prodigies from around the world. These were the smartest young minds from 60 different countries, each representing the pinnacle of mathematical achievement in their region. "Welcome to the 47th Annual International Mathematics Competition Championship," announced Dr. Margaret Thompson, the competition director. "You represent the future of mathematical research and innovation. Over the next 3 days, you'll face challenges designed to test not just your computational skills, but your creativity, logic, and ability to solve problems that have no obvious solutions." Noah looked around the auditorium and felt both intimidated and exhilarated. Some competitors wore expensive suits and carried luxury calculators, clearly representing well-funded private schools and wealthy families. Others, like Noah, wore simple clothes and carried basic supplies, representing communities that had sacrificed to send them here. But Noah had learned something important during his airplane encounter with Richard. Success wasn't determined by background or resources. It was determined by the ability to solve problems that others couldn't solve. The first round of the competition consisted of individual problem solving, with each participant working alone to solve increasingly complex mathematical puzzles. Noah opened his test booklet and felt his confidence surge as he read the first problem. It involved number theory, one of his strongest areas, and he could immediately see patterns that suggested multiple solution approaches. For the next 4 hours, Noah lost himself completely in the world of mathematical problem solving. Each question presented a unique challenge that required him to combine different mathematical concepts in creative ways. The problems ranged from pure mathematics to practical applications, determining the optimal distribution pattern for a telecommunications network, calculating probability distributions for genetic inheritance patterns, solving complex geometric proofs involving multidimensional space, finding algorithmic solutions for resource allocation problems. Noah worked steadily and methodically, using techniques his grandmother had taught him about staying calm under pressure, combined with the analytical skills he had developed through years of self-directed study. When time was called, Noah felt cautiously optimistic about his performance, but he knew that the competition would only get more difficult over the next 2 days. After the first round of competition, Noah returned to the hotel to find Richard concluding a video conference call with investors in Tokyo. "How did it go?" Richard asked immediately, his genuine concern evident in his voice. "I think I did well on the first round," Noah replied, "but there are some incredibly talented competitors here. The level of mathematical sophistication is higher than anything I've encountered before." Richard could hear the slight uncertainty in Noah's voice and recognized the self-doubt that often affects high achievers when they encounter new levels of competition. "Noah, can I tell you something I learned during my first major business presentation?" Noah nodded, curious about Richard's perspective. "I was presenting to a room full of venture capitalists who had decades more experience than I did, and I started to doubt whether I belonged there. But then I realized that they had invited me to that meeting because I had something valuable to offer, a perspective and set of skills that they couldn't find elsewhere." Richard adjusted Emma in her high chair as she played with colorful blocks. "You weren't selected for this competition randomly. You earned your place here through exceptional mathematical ability. Trust in the skills that got you here." Noah felt his confidence returning as he absorbed Richard's advice. He had spent so much time focusing on his competitors' advantages that he had forgotten his own unique strengths. "Now," Richard continued with a smile, "I believe I hired someone to help me with Emma this afternoon. I have a crucial meeting with potential partners for our European expansion." For the next 3 hours, Noah discovered that caring for Emma was both relaxing and energizing. Her curiosity about the world around her reminded him of his own fascination with discovering new patterns and solutions. Noah taught Emma simple mathematical concepts using her toys, counting blocks, sorting shapes by color and size, and creating patterns with her stuffed animals. "Look, Emma," Noah said, arranging her blocks in sequences. "If we have 2 red blocks, then 4 blue blocks, then 6 yellow blocks, what comes next?" Emma clapped her hands and reached for the green blocks, somehow understanding the pattern even at 6 months old. Noah realized that teaching mathematical concepts to a baby was helping him think about fundamental principles in new ways, preparation that would be valuable for the advanced rounds of the competition. The second day of competition involved team problem solving, where groups of 4 participants had to collaborate on complex mathematical challenges that required multiple perspectives and approaches. Noah was assigned to a team with competitors from Japan, Germany, and Brazil. Initially, he felt nervous about working with students who had clearly received more formal mathematical training than he had. But as they began working on their first challenge, designing an algorithmic solution for optimizing traffic flow in major cities, Noah discovered that his unique background actually provided advantages. "In Chicago, I've observed traffic patterns firsthand," Noah contributed to the team discussion. "The mathematical models need to account for real-world variables like human behavior, weather conditions, and emergency situations." Kenji from Japan, who had been working on purely theoretical approaches, looked at Noah with new respect. "That's an excellent point. Our mathematical solution needs to be practically applicable." As the day progressed, Noah found himself naturally taking on a leadership role within his team. His ability to bridge theoretical mathematics with practical problem solving impressed his teammates and helped them develop more comprehensive solutions. "Noah, your approach to this problem is brilliant," said Maria from Brazil. "You're seeing connections that the rest of us missed." By the end of the second day, Noah's team had scored in the top 3 for their collaborative solutions, and Noah had earned recognition from competition judges for his innovative thinking. But more importantly, Noah had gained confidence in his ability to compete at the highest levels of mathematical achievement while staying true to his own unique problem-solving style. That evening, as Noah recounted his competition experiences while helping Emma with her dinner, Richard found himself reconsidering his initial assessment of the young man's potential. Richard had originally seen Noah as a mathematically gifted teenager who deserved educational support. But watching Noah's analytical approach to childcare, his leadership capabilities, and his ability to bridge different worlds of experience, Richard began to see something much more significant. "Noah, I want to discuss something important with you," Richard said after Emma had been put to bed. "What's that, Mr. Whitaker?" "Regardless of how you perform in tomorrow's final round, I want to offer you a position in my company after you complete your education." Noah looked surprised. "What kind of position?" "I'm thinking about creating a new division focused on applying artificial intelligence and mathematical modeling to social problems, issues like educational inequality, healthcare accessibility, and economic development in underserved communities." Richard's excitement was evident as he outlined his vision. "You have something that most brilliant mathematicians lack. You understand both the theoretical aspects of problem solving and the real-world challenges faced by people who need solutions. That combination is incredibly rare and valuable." Noah felt overwhelmed by the scope of what Richard was proposing. "Mr. Whitaker, that sounds amazing, but I'm still just 16 years old. I have so much to learn before I could contribute to something that important." "Exactly," Richard replied, "which is why I want to support your education and development over the next several years. The Whitaker Foundation will cover all your educational expenses, undergraduate, graduate, whatever level of study you want to pursue, in exchange for your commitment to eventually applying your skills to benefit communities like the one you came from." Noah realized that Richard was offering him something much more significant than just financial support. He was offering a partnership that could allow Noah to achieve his dreams while staying connected to his values and community. The third and final day of the International Mathematics Competition featured individual presentations where each participant had to solve a complex, open-ended mathematical problem and present their solution to a panel of judges. Noah's assigned problem involved developing a mathematical model for predicting and preventing the spread of infectious diseases in densely populated urban areas, a challenge that required him to combine epidemiology, statistics, network theory, and public health policy. As Noah worked on his solution, he drew upon every aspect of his background and experience. He thought about the crowded conditions in his Chicago neighborhood, the healthcare challenges his family had faced, and the mathematical principles he had learned through years of self-directed study. Noah's presentation lasted 20 minutes and covered mathematical concepts that would challenge graduate students. But he delivered it with the confidence and clarity of someone who truly understood both the theoretical and practical implications of his work. "Mr. Simon," said Dr. Elizabeth Chen, one of the competition judges, "your solution demonstrates not only advanced mathematical thinking, but also a sophisticated understanding of real-world applications. Can you tell us how you developed this approach?" "Ma'am, I grew up in a community where healthcare access is limited and population density creates unique challenges," Noah replied. "I approached this problem by thinking about how mathematical models could actually help people in situations like those I've witnessed firsthand." The judges exchanged impressed looks as they realized that Noah's background had provided him with insights that purely academic training couldn't replicate. When Noah finished his presentation, he felt confident that he had performed at his highest level, regardless of the competition outcome. That evening, at the competition's closing ceremony, Noah sat with hundreds of other competitors as the results were announced. In third place, representing Germany, Klaus Muller. In second place, representing South Korea, Park Min-jun. Noah felt his heart pounding as he realized that his name could be called next, or might not be called at all. And the winner of this year's International Mathematics Competition Championship, representing the United States, Noah Simon from Chicago, Illinois. The auditorium erupted in applause as Noah walked to the stage in a daze, hardly believing that his dream had become reality. Dr. Thompson handed him the championship trophy and a certificate guaranteeing him a full scholarship to MIT, including living expenses and research opportunities. "Noah, your work over these 3 days has been exceptional," Dr. Thompson announced to the audience. "But what impressed our judges most was your ability to apply advanced mathematical concepts to solve real-world problems that affect people's daily lives." As Noah stood on the stage holding his trophy, he looked out into the audience and saw Richard Whitaker applauding enthusiastically while holding Emma. who was clapping her tiny hands as if she understood the significance of the moment. Later that evening in Richard's hotel suite, Noah and Richard celebrated with a quiet dinner while Emma played with her toys nearby. "Noah, I have to tell you that watching your journey over these past 4 days has been one of the most inspiring experiences of my life," Richard said, raising his glass of sparkling cider in a toast. "Mr. Whitaker, I can't even begin to thank you for everything you've done for me," Noah replied. "The competition was just the beginning. The real opportunity is what you've offered me for the future." Richard smiled as he watched Emma reach toward Noah, clearly having formed an attachment to the young man who had brought her so much comfort. "Noah, I think we both discovered something important during this trip. You found out that your abilities can take you anywhere in the world, and I learned that mentorship isn't just about providing opportunities. It's about recognizing potential that already exists and helping it flourish." Noah picked up Emma, who gurgled happily and grabbed his finger with her tiny hand. "You know what's funny?" Noah said, looking down at Emma. "This all started because I helped calm a crying baby on an airplane. I never could have predicted that such a simple act of kindness would lead to all of this." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "That's the thing about life. You never know when doing the right thing will open doors you never imagined existed." As they prepared for their flight back to the United States the next day, both Noah and Richard knew that their lives had been permanently changed by their chance encounter. Noah had won more than a mathematics competition. He had discovered a mentor, a future career path, and proof that his dreams could become reality through hard work and determination. Richard had found more than a capable caregiver for Emma. He had discovered a brilliant young partner who could help him build a legacy of using business success to solve important social problems. But most importantly, both of them had learned that sometimes the most life-changing opportunities come from the simple decision to help someone in need, even when there's nothing obvious to be gained from doing so. As their plane lifted off from London, heading back across the Atlantic, Noah looked out the window at the city that had changed his life and smiled. The poor black boy from Chicago's South Side who had done the unthinkable by calming a billionaire's crying baby had discovered that the most unthinkable thing of all was how far a single act of compassion could carry him. The crying had stopped, the competition was won, and the future stretched ahead filled with possibilities that Noah had never dared to imagine. But he would never forget that it all began with a simple decision to help when help was needed most. If you enjoy this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more.